Good morning. This is Omni View, episode 69 for June 3rd, 2026. Balanced news perspectives. Here's the news, the perspectives, and the questions worth asking. New U.S. tariffs on 60 economies over forced labor practices could raise prices for British shoppers and slow already fragile global growth. The U.S. Trade Representative has outlined new duties targeting dozens of countries, including the UK. Proposed rates stand at 10% or 12.5%, depending on each economy's forced labor rules. The move follows a Supreme Court decision that struck down many earlier tariffs. Officials state the duties aim to curb trade linked to forced labor. European officials and consumer groups view the approach as necessary guardrails that penalize supply chains relying on forced labor while protecting domestic industries already meeting higher standards. The BBC reports supporters describe the sliding scale between economies with full or partial prohibitions as a measured way to advance labor rights. Technology companies and some U.S. trade groups counter that the duties risk raising consumer costs and disrupting supply chains amid fragile global growth. The Financial Times notes several firms have already delayed European product launches in response to similar past measures. How might these duties affect everyday prices in the UK and elsewhere? Shifting now to events in Russia. Ukrainian drones hit an oil terminal in St. Petersburg and set part of the facility ablaze hours before an economic forum hosted by President Putin. Ukrainian President Zelensky confirmed the strike that targeted infrastructure in Putin's birthplace. Russian authorities have not yet issued a detailed public response. Ukrainian officials framed the operation as a necessary demonstration that Ukraine can reach deep into Russian territory and disrupt energy exports funding the war effort. NPR coverage highlights the symbolic weight of striking an oil port ahead of a high-profile forum. Russian-aligned commentary stresses the risk of escalation and potential civilian or economic fallout beyond the immediate target. Mail Online reporting notes such strikes could harden public resolve inside Russia rather than weaken it. What does the choice of target reveal about Ukraine's current strategy? Meanwhile, the OECD has lowered its global growth forecast. The organization cited damage from the ongoing U.S.-Iran conflict as a key factor affecting trade, energy prices, and investor confidence. Economists expect the drag to continue into the second half of the year. Some analysts tie the downward revision directly to measurable declines in projected output caused by energy route disruptions across multiple regions at once. CNBC reporting reflects this view of the conflict as the dominant external shock. Other observers emphasize that domestic policy choices in major economies, including tariff plans and fiscal measures, are compounding the geopolitical pressure and may prove more decisive over time. Which sectors are most exposed to prolonged Middle East instability? In a related development, Iranian drones and missiles struck Kuwait's international airport. Kuwaiti authorities reported significant damage. The U.S. responded with strikes on an Iranian military site on Qeshm Island, and negotiations between Washington and Tehran appear to have stalled. Kuwaiti officials stressed that interceptions occurred, yet damage was still sustained, underscoring risks to third country civilian facilities and international travel. France 24 coverage presents the airport strike as a notable escalation. U.S. statements describe the response as defensive protection of forces and interests, while both governments continue to frame their actions in those terms. What signals would indicate talks are resuming? Turning to domestic figures in Britain, Office for National Statistics data show 14.4% of UK households had no one in employment in the first quarter. The figure marks the highest share since 2017 and a two-year peak. The rise coincides with broader economic pressures, including tax changes and inflation. Some analysts link the increase in workless households to the timing of recent tax rises and their reported effects on hiring and hours worked in retail and hospitality. Mail Online reporting presents the ONS household level measure as evidence of policy impact. Other commentary points to longer-term structural shifts, such as an aging population and changing participation patterns that predate the latest fiscal measures. Which regions or age groups show the largest increases? NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte arrived in Kyiv for an unannounced trip. The visit followed recent Russian strikes on the capital and comes as Ukrainian forces conducted strikes inside Russia. Supporters of the trip argue high-level presence signals continued alliance commitment at a moment of intensified fighting. France 24 reporting notes the need to coordinate immediate military support and assess damage. Other perspectives observe that such visits can serve diplomatic signaling purposes without committing new resources. What specific requests might Ukrainian officials have made during the visit? Now, to really understand the tariff proposal, there is an administrative sequence most headlines leave out. The Office of the U.S. Trade Representative follows a structured review under statutes such as Section 301. Officials first identify practices deemed unfair, invite public comment, hold hearings, and then recommend duty rates that can later be modified or challenged in court. This path explains why the current proposal distinguishes between economies with full versus partial forced labor bans, and why earlier tariffs were struck down by the Supreme Court. Proposed rates therefore function as starting points subject to negotiation, litigation, and congressional oversight. Next time you see a headline announcing new tariffs, ask which statute authorizes them, what comment period has occurred, and which countries have already signaled they will challenge the duties at the World Trade Organization or in U.S. courts. Tomorrow, watch for further reactions from European governments to the proposed U.S. duties and any updates on energy market movements after the St. Petersburg strike. That wraps up today's Omni View. Remember, the best informed people read more than one perspective. If this show helps you do that, share it with someone who values fair coverage. See you tomorrow. And before you go, this show is part of the NARA Network, a family of daily podcasts covering tech, science, markets, and more. If you enjoyed today's episode, give Environmental Intelligence a listen, the Environment and Climate Policy Brief for Canada. You can explore the whole lineup at naranetwork.com. This episode used AI voice synthesis of my voice. Editorial selection and analysis are my own.